All right, well, let me begin by extending a warm welcome to everyone that is joining us today. We are very thankful that you've come to help us lift up the good work that we are doing with restorative justice in Oakland Unified. Now, let me start by telling you who I am. My name is Barbara McClung, and I have the great privilege of being the director of our behavioral health initiatives for Oakland Unified School District. I'm one of the old guard, you might say. I've been around since we began the implementation of restorative practices almost a decade ago. It's been quite an amazing journey. So we started back in 2005 with one small school, Cole Middle School in West Oakland, one community partner, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, one restorative justice coordinator, and one willing principal who had a vision for equity for her school. Fast forward to 2015, where we have almost 30 schools implementing restorative justice. We have 30 willing, enthusiastic principals. We have a couple dozen restorative justice staff and many community partners who are engaged in this work with us. But something special happened at Cole Middle School that has actually changed the course of our history in Oakland Unified School District, and that is that we successfully eliminated racial disproportionality over the brief period of 3 years. And while for some of you that may sound like a long time, actually it took a lot longer for it to get that way, so actually that was considered a significant accomplishment. Now, today we have a Restorative Justice Board resolution. We have widespread support from our leadership, including our superintendent, our police services, our parents, our staff, our community partners, and most of all our students to whom this work is dedicated. And we haven't done it alone. I want to thank our primary partner, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. I want to thank our funders, the City of Oakland, Department of Health and Human Services, OFCY, Measure Y, the California Endowment, the U.S. Department of Ed, and of course our school board for being early adopters of our vision for a restorative district in Oakland. But the bottom line is, the proof is in the pudding, right? So, you know, we can talk about restorative practices, but in the end, are restorative practices making a difference by eliminating racial disparities in attendance, discipline, and student achievement? That's the litmus test for us. As well as, are we replacing zero-tolerance policies with restorative approaches that foster inclusion and community in our schools? And is restorative justice closing the school-to-prison pipeline by fostering caring relationships and high expectations for students in Oakland? In conclusion, we are here today to holler with you a resounding yes. Restorative practices are transformative in our schools, and we have new evidence to share with you that will tell our story about how and why. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Barb. I'm honored to have the opportunity to MC this event, particularly because I work closely with Barb and David on the crisis management and crisis response team here at OUSD, and I see all the great work that they do and the positive impact that has on schools. So this is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate that work and to bring it to a wider audience. My name is Troy Flynn. I'm the Director of Communications here at OUSD, and I appreciate you all taking time out from your busy day to come. I wish everybody here in Oakland could be in this space right now, because the work that's being done in terms of restorative justice and strengthening cultures at our school is critical, not just to what's happening in the school district, but in terms of addressing and improving all the issues we face as a society and as a city here in Oakland. So thank you for making time again to come out. I want to tell you a little bit about the format of today's presentation. We want to have you talk to the people who are most involved with the work. So we're going to begin by introducing the panelists, and then after I introduce all the speakers, they will each provide a brief 2-minute presentation that explains their relationship to the work, and then we'll open up the floor to a question and answer session. If you feel you need amplification, please come up to the microphone and speak into the mic, or you can speak from your seat if you feel more comfortable that way. But the people who will be giving you a little bit more detail about restorative justice are Barb McClung, who you just heard from. She's the Director of Behavioral Health here in OUSD, which is much bigger than just the restorative justice program. It provides so much support to students in terms of mental health, grief counseling, and other measures which are really important for addressing some of the harm that they're experiencing at home, in the streets, or in school, and building stronger cultures. David Usom is a point person for restorative justice in OUSD. He's the program manager for restorative justice, and he's done a wonderful job taking this program from its infancy to really something that's a national model for Oakland, and we applaud him for that work. The most important person here is Brian Rios. He's a junior at Met West. He's also a peer leader for our restorative justice program, and he's really going to bring it home for us by talking about his personal experience with restorative justice and the difference that's made for kids at Met West and elsewhere. We also have Sonia Jain, who's the author of the report on restorative justice. She's a veteran social researcher here in Oakland and also the principal and founder of Data in Action. And finally, right next to me is Antoine Wilson. He became the superintendent of OUSD in July 2014 and has been a big backer and supporter of restorative justice work. So Barb, I'm going to toss it to you first.
All right, we're on. Great. Good morning, everybody. Oakland Unified is no different than many other urban school districts across this country that have been struggling with the repercussions of zero tolerance and related teacher, staff, and institutional practices that for decades have failed our students of color, particularly our African American students. At OUSD, we've been instrumental in employing several cutting-edge and innovative strategies to collectively combat this racially disproportionate discipline. These include African American male achievement, positive behavior intervention supports, social emotional learning, linked learning and pathways to college and career, and restorative justice. Restorative justice works with, aligns with these other initiatives at school sites to provide the environment that's conducive to learning so our students can be successful and graduate. At OUSD, we implement a multi-tiered model of restorative justice. We build community in our classrooms and in our schools. We respond to harm and conflict in a way that does not push students out of school, but holds them accountable in real and meaningful ways and provides healing at the same time. And we provide individualized circles of support for students who are re-entering after incarceration or involuntary transfer from another school. And we have two main tracks at our restorative justice program here. We have a peer restorative justice program. That program is funded by the City of Oakland, Oakland Fund for Children and Youth. And we have 8 middle schools involved in that program. And we also have a whole school restorative justice program, and that program facilitates a school-wide culture shift across a whole school and involves the whole school community and takes many years to implement. The peer restorative justice program has had last year at the time that this data was collected for this report, there had been 500 cases that had gone to Circle for harm or conflict or remediation. Out of those 500 plus cases, 98% were either resolved or pending resolution at the time of the report. We surveyed approximately 350 teachers, administrators, parents, and other support staff at RJ sites, restorative justice sites, and we asked them whether restorative justice practices improve their school climate, and just under 70% said yes. 64% said it helped improve relationships between teachers and students at their school. This report also indicates that African American students had fewer suspensions at restorative justice sites. At OUSD, restorative justice has been especially effective for African American students, lowering suspensions and in some cases completely eliminating the racial disparities in discipline for them. As program manager of the Restorative Justice Program at OUSD, I go to school sites and I see students asking for circles instead of fighting. I see the culture shift happening before my eyes. And so it's good to have data. It's good to show the world that our data, the numbers are there and that this program is working. And also there's a qualitative part of this that can only be seen by talking with students and staff at school sites. It's empowering, it's equity-based, and I know it's working just from being in schools and watching it happen. So this is a talking piece, and this is an object that we pass around a circle. I'm willing to bet that right now, somewhere in Oakland Unified, there's some students passing a talking piece around the circle because they feel empowered by the process, and they're able to resolve conflicts with it. And it indicates that whoever has it is the person that's speaking. This particular talking piece was created by a student at Cole Middle School that Barb referred to earlier, and it says "dream" on it. So since this was created back when the program first originated at Cole Middle School with Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, I want to hold it up now to honor those that began this initiative and to celebrate the journey that we've taken and to acknowledge that we still have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Brian Rios. Thank you all for being here and letting me speak. It's a real honor, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of hard to understand. My voice is, a little raspy because I'm sick. But anyways, I as a student have a unique perspective doing the restorative justice work because I work so closely with it. And within our executive summary and the full report, there's a statistic that I really connect to, and it states that almost 70% of staff that were surveyed reported that restorative practices have improved school climate at their school in the past year, and more than 64% reported that restorative practices have helped better their relationships with students. I see this statistic as a reflection of my own community at Met West High School, because Met West High School has really adopted it as a part of their culture, not just for conflict resolution. In my own experience working with restorative justice at my school, as well as other variety of high schools and middle schools, I've seen that it has strengthened a lot of, learning environments. It has improved student-teacher relationships, collaboration between students and teachers. It's created a safe space where we can learn to trust one another, and it's given a greater understanding between students, teachers, and peers. So I kind of want to talk about one of my recent experiences. I went to work with Oakland High School, and I was there to facilitate a circle with RJ Restorative Justice Coordinator named Ariana Kaplan. And when we were coming up with the schedule for this circle, she kept mentioning that there was a language barrier between the students because they were all newcomers to the school. They only knew their primary language, so their first language. And she asked me if I had any type of activities that could really build community and break the language barrier. And so I just came up with the idea of, instead of even talking, just making sounds. And as soon as the class came in, it was kind of awkward. They saw a new face around their age, and they felt a little, nervous coming up to me and speaking to me because they didn't know who I was and what I was there for. But as soon as Ariana introduced me, the class really wanted to know a little bit more about me. So as soon as she was done speaking, I started facilitating in Spanish. And the majority of them speak Spanish while another part speak Chinese and Arabic. And so when a couple of those students noticed that I spoke Spanish, they felt I felt that the room had really shifted, that the energy did. And a lot of the students really started to feel more comfortable in the room with me there, and knew that I was there just to instruct them. And so I started noticing that most of them did really participate in the game, activity, and I thought it was a real breakthrough because it didn't matter about the language. They were all participating and getting along, and it was just like really beautiful to see that. Another story about this was that restorative justice is really implemented. Restorative justice is implemented and it becomes a part of someone's life, not just in schools, but in the greater community. And like at my school, I had witnessed and participated in a circle meant to build solidarity amongst Oakland youth and teachers, which meant that it wasn't just Met West High School, it was Oakland High, it was Oakland Tech, a couple other middle schools, Arise. And the meeting was basically to speak about police brutality since the events of Ferguson. And so the teachers came up with the idea of giving us that space and making us and just giving us the space to speak about what we felt and how we wanted to act as a response to this. It was set up as a restorative justice circle, one mic, there was guidelines we had to follow, people spoke out, and it was just really beautiful to see that people really cared about the community and felt that it was like a real issue and wanted to respond to it. And these methods led to a greater understanding of justice and peace. A quote that I feel summarizes what I've said so far is that students in restorative justice circles report enhanced ability to understand peers, manage emotions, greater empathy, resolve conflict with parents, improve home environment, and maintain positive relationships with peers. They are learning life skills and sustainable conflict management skills and applying them in everyday life situations. Thank you for listening.
Could I stand up there?
Sure.
It'll be easier for me to speak from up here. It's hard for me to speak when I'm sitting. So good morning, everybody. I don't know if I could do justice to what I've learned about restorative justice in the next 2 to 3 minutes. I'm the evaluator on this project, and this is really exciting to take a minute to share with you some of the incredible results that we've been seeing. I just want to put out there that this is starting to look at some of the outcomes and the impacts. It's not the end. So it's a work in progress. It's something we need to continue to build off of. But what we're learning so far is very exciting. It's very promising. It's evidence that shows that restorative justice works. As many of you know, that schools around the country, as does Oakland Unified, have been fighting zero tolerance policies and dealing with the implications of that for students, especially for students of color, and for schools. It's important we find effective, fair, just strategies that work against discipline, against disproportionality, against suspensions, etc. Restorative justice is one of those strategies. And I think in Oakland Unified, given that they've been implementing it for almost 10 years now, we have sufficient evidence at this point, especially in the last 3 years, to say that what's being practiced, some of the circles, the conversations, etc., are working to reduce suspensions, are working to improve academic achievement. And some of the data is in the report when we start looking at reading levels. Schools that have restorative justice compared to schools that don't have restorative justice, you see a significant increase in reading levels in schools that have RJ compared to schools that don't. So in terms of the reading levels, it's 128% increase in schools with RJ compared to 11% without. When we start looking at graduation rates of students over the last 3 years, graduation rates have increased significantly, about 60% in schools with restorative justice versus schools without, which is about 7%. And the reason we could relate some of the impacts to restorative justice is because it's a multi-tiered approach. You're looking at school-level impact. It changes the school culture, school climate, as well as it's affecting student behavior, student engagement, developmental assets, things like empathy. It's increasing empathy among students, problem-solving skills, life skills that'll actually stay with them for life, that'll prepare them for learning and engagement in school, but beyond. It'll keep them out of streets, out of violence, out of escalating into trajectories down the wrong path. We're seeing some evidence that it's working much more for African American students. We did some advanced analysis in this report towards the end, controlling for student and school level confounders, which are basically race, gender, age, etc. And we still found a significant association between restorative justice and reduction in suspension. So restorative justice is definitely part of the solution, in conjunction with other things, other programs, other initiatives. I just wanted to touch real quick on some of the recommendations that we made in the report. I'm not going to go too much into methodology, but we used mixed methods. We did focus groups with students, with teachers, with RJ coordinators. We did interviews. We looked at admin data, city span data, multiple, it was about 7 different data sources. So this is based on perceptions. I'm almost sharing with you collective voice of what others have told us. So it's not one person saying this. It's really, we have substantial evidence here that it's working. In terms of the recommendations, parents need to be much more engaged. So even though there's been substantial increase in capacity building and trainings and number of staff hired in the last 3 years, parents were the least likely to be informed about restorative justice. Least trained, only 10% who we surveyed were informed about restorative justice. Another thing was continuing to build the infrastructure at the district level to do more shared best practices. There were a lot of challenges at the school level implementation, whether it was changes in principles, whether it was communication, information sharing between the coordinator and the details I could go into. Limited time folks have to engage in the circles, etc. So again, having more infrastructure at the district level to be able to sustain this and expand this. Expand it to elementary schools. And let me look at what we have. Capitalize on the enormous potential of the students. The peer leaders and the peer RJ program is in 8 elementary schools. And the student leaders that we talked to, the middle school students, the high school students, it wasn't just about reducing suspensions. It wasn't just about alternative to suspension. It was really increasing positive assets, positive behaviors, positive attributes. That's very telling, that building caring relationships with your teachers, with your peers. These are much more upstream outcomes that have implications on things like achievement and suspensions and community building. Using restorative justice as a philosophy, a set of values, not just as simply a program, but something that complements other initiatives like PBIS and others. It's very much complements and is based on youth development principles. Another thing we talked about is to situate RJ in schools in the larger context of social justice and equity. So one of the main things we heard from the adults and from the students, people are talking about racism, you're talking about poverty, you're talking about housing issues, inequality, violence, etc. But using that more systematically, using RJ circles and conversations as an approach to addressing inequities. And I think those were some of the recommendations. I wanted to end with a quote. And if you look at the report, there's some amazing quotes that I can't do justice to right now, but that spoke loudly about the impacts of the program. One of the teachers that we talked to said, "I love RJ. It is equity focused and is truly a practice that promotes positive learning environments and community building in classrooms." So I hope it continues. Thank you.
I can go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I had the cue. Good morning. I'm excited to have an opportunity to be here and talk with all of you today. Extremely excited for several reasons. One is just, being superintendent in Oakland Unified School District's lots of reasons to be proud of the district, and the implementation of RJ is certainly one of those reasons. Beginning in 2005, I started as principal at Montbello High School in Denver, Colorado, and was the first large high school to implement restorative justice, and implemented it with great success. And then going into the role of assistant superintendent, we took it district-wide. This is what we know, and this is what's so exciting about the implementation here in Oakland and knowing what's possible. We know that all our students have great capacity, that there is nothing that is inherent in them that should lead them to be suspended or end up in the criminal justice system. They come to us with great assets and the ability to succeed, and this is all of our students. And so it doesn't surprise me, nor should it surprise any of us, to hear that we are seeing, through restorative justice and the implementation of other restorative practices, a significant reduction in the behavioral incidents and suspensions of African American students. Why should that not come as a surprise? It's because we know that the only reason we see significant increases, where we've seen significant increases in behavior incidents and suspension for African American students, is when the system has asked students to adjust to them. When the system has asked students to adjust to practices that do not come across to students as feeling respectful, that does not come across to students as allowing them to be seen. And what restorative justice does, along with restorative practices, as was articulated very well here, is it provides an opportunity for students to have voice, to be seen as whole individuals who come with great intellect, great ability to problem solve, to understand the circumstances that may impact another person's feelings that they may have actually caused. They have the ability to understand that if we but afford them the opportunity to. And so the fact that we are implementing restorative justice here in Oakland and we're seeing these positive impacts certainly speaks to the need to accelerate. And so I definitely appreciate the recommendations that are here. We have every intention of continuing restorative justice, and along with that, other restorative practices. I believe in no-nonsense nurturing. That was also a strategy that had great success of implementing in the past. We expect to expand those implementations here in Oakland Unified. Along with that, culturally responsive positive behavior intervention and supports, PBIS. I think that's important, that it is culturally responsive, where you actually introduce into that strategy how culture plays a role in what we do, and making sure that it is interwoven into the fabric of the school. And then also programs such as manhood development. We are very excited about those programs here in Oakland, and what we want to see happen is, and we talk about this in the Pathway to Excellence, we want to learn from the lessons that we have seen here through the manhood development courses, and think about now how we expand that to, yes, more African American male students, but also what that expansion looks like for other populations of students. How do we ensure that our Latino students have access to those opportunities? How do we make sure that our young female students have access to those types of programs? Because what we do know is that when young people have opportunity to be engaged with individuals who look like them, who share common experiences, who have perhaps overcome similar challenges, that young people begin to be inspired. They have belief. They begin to recognize that there is a greater opportunity out there for them, and that there is nothing inherent in them that says that they cannot be successful. And what I want to just make sure that we lead with is always coming from an asset model with our students. and helping them understand that they come to us with great strengths, and it is our responsibility to tap into those strengths and to expect them to be successful and not communicate any type of surprise when they are successful, but actually much more an acknowledgement and appreciation for the fact that they are displaying the gifts that they naturally have. What we are committing to in Oakland Unified, just to be specific, is actually engaging with these recommendations and really thinking about how we systematize these over the next several years. But in addition to that, there are efforts going on now to develop a common discipline matrix across the district. I believe strongly that there has to be a common discipline matrix across the district where restorative approaches are embedded in that. That philosophy is central to the implementation, so that you do not have instances where you see young students 5, 6, 7, 8 years old who are being sent home. I can't think of any good reason for that as a parent of 2 7-year-olds. Can't think of anything that they could do that could be so difficult for us at school to handle that should lead to them being sent home. I can certainly know, though, that the living daylights could be scared out of them, and that they could come to develop great empathy if adults provide the opportunity for them to understand the impact of their actions and the negative consequences that their actions may have caused, depending upon whatever behavior they may have exhibited. And I think that teaching those lessons in school go hand in hand with the types of lessons that parents are also trying to teach at home, and that we as a broader society need to be taught before students become adults who have not learned these important messages. And so I want to make sure that we say very clearly that we will be implementing and we'll be bringing up to the board. There's a lot of engagement that's happening. We'll be bringing up to the board. We plan to do that before the end of this year, having a discipline matrix that we bring forth that would add to the work that's already done around a common referral form, implementing restorative justice, and so on and so forth, so that we can take the variance out of our system in terms of what types of consequences students should be receiving. And so just other types of things where we're saying that we are not going to be suspending students for 5 days for arbitrary types of things. We know that it's important that students exhibit the type of behavior that is conducive to successful schools and quality schools, but we also know that we can teach those behaviors in ways that keep students in school. We can't increase student achievement by finding ways to have more of our students in the streets. That is just a fact. They have to be in school. We have to find ways to keep them. And I know that that requires great challenge and great sacrifice on the part of us as adults, which means that we have to provide, as a system, more training for adults. This partnership has been, in many ways, partnership of the willing. And we want to provide more incentive for leaders to be willing. And one way that you do that is by making it clear that in order to be a leader, you must be willing. Because why is that important? Because we can't leave it to happenstance or the whim of adults as to whether or not students are exposed to these types of opportunities that in many ways are going to make the difference in terms of the type of life outcomes that they may be exposed to, because they may not be in any other setting where they get an opportunity to learn these types of things. The other piece is by providing those leaders additional training and supports. We're also looking to expand supports financially, and we're looking to do that over the course of this year and the next year in terms of our budgeting processes, so that in the 15-16 school year and the 16-17 school year, we have resources that schools can employ as they scale up restorative justice and other restorative practices. So again, extremely excited about the work. The news here, I think, provides us great impetus to accelerate. And then finally, just to say that a lot of conversation happening around our efforts to improve some of our lowest performing schools, and they're a part of that, and we'll be providing more information. But we have pillars of transformation. And one of the pillars of transformation speaks to school culture. And in that document we'll be putting out, one of the things that we point out very clearly in terms of school culture is that any new school that we improve through transformation into school supports must utilize restorative approaches and be able to articulate quite clearly how that'll be intrinsic to the culture and the fabric of the school and how the school will operate, because we know that only by doing that do we stand a chance to significantly impact the outcomes for students long term.
Thanks to all of our presenters. Now that we've heard some personal reflections on the importance of restorative justice, we'll open it up to questions from the floor. If you feel comfortable, it would be great if you would line up here on the side by the microphone, and then one by one come up and speak. And if you have a question that you want to target to a particular panelist, please address that panelist by name. If it's just a general question, then they will determine amongst themselves who's best positioned to respond.
I saw a description in the executive summary today about these harm circles. I was wondering if I could get some more information about that.
The question is about harm circles and what a harm circle is?
And the definition, maybe description of how one of those looks like.
Okay. When there's a conflict or there's been a harm done to a member of the community, so there might be a person responsible for the harm and a person who's been harmed, or a community that's been harmed, rather than punishing for that behavior or punishing to the rule that was broken, we focus on the harm that was caused and the resulting needs of those harms and the obligations that the harm has created. And the process we use is a circle process where we bring the person responsible together with the person or the people that they've harmed and other stakeholders, members of the community, other people that may be affected by what happened. We do this after only doing careful prep, making sure that the person that's responsible or the people that are responsible are going to be accountable for their actions in ways that provide healing for the people who've been harmed. And after we've spoken to the people who've been harmed, to make sure that they're willing to do this. After we do that, we bring them together and we talk about what happened, what led the person to do what they did, what have they thought about since, what's been difficult about this for them, who's been impacted by this and how, and ultimately what's going to happen to make it right. And so what it does is it leads to what I would consider the gift of being able to make something right. Usually when someone breaks a rule or a law or harm someone, we just punish them and there's no learning going on. And so discipline, we feel, should be a learning process. And this process allows students to understand the impact of what they've done and then seek to make it right. And so that's what happens in a harm circle. And when you ask people who've participated in harm circle, particularly people who've been harmed, their satisfaction with the process is a lot higher than with other punitive models of, you might say, justice or discipline.
This is a question for Brian. So for Brian, at what point did you really buy into the restorative justice concepts or principles? And was it a certain event or was it a certain circle that kind of made you say, yeah, this works and I think that this would work for other students?
Well, the first time I believed that restorative justice could be used and could work on students was when I personally was working with my internship, and there were students from CCPA and Met West, and there was a certain issue where there were just like students disagreeing with each other, and so we kind of formed a restorative justice circle or a harm circle, and brought up the issues in which like the students started to talk to each other rather than keeping it keeping it inside. And so as soon as we started talking about it more and more and more, I'm not gonna really go into detail because it was confidential about like all the issues. And so I believe that as soon as that harm circle and the problem was addressed, people really started to like think about it more and more as the days went by, and sooner or later they actually started talking and they said that they were friends again, and I was like, wow, it really worked. Like, I want to be a part of this type of work, that helps people like deal with their issues. So yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Doug, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a two-part question. One is, over the last 10 years, it looks like you've started restorative justice programs in about 24 schools, and I was curious what were the deciding factors in these schools that got the programs? And the second part is, are there any specific goals you have over the next few years to bring the numbers up to more schools? Because it looks like there's 24 out of 86 schools.
All right, thanks for that question. Again, my name is Barb McClung. The process of expanding over the past 10 years has been a very organic one, meaning that it has not been mandated. It actually, the way that we've approached restorative practices here in the district is through what we would call seeding, meaning we just offer training for any teacher, any administrator, any staff that wanted to learn about restorative practices. And what happened was sort of like a grassroots expansion. They went back to their school sites and they started hosting circles in their classrooms, in their therapy groups, amongst staff, and it kind of caught fire. And so we have, all the schools that are participating are schools that have requested to become an RJ school. The schools that are participating in our peer restorative justice, we identified middle schools for that initiative because middle schools were where we were seeing the greatest level of disproportionality, so the highest rate of suspension. And that money from the City of Oakland has really been dedicated to, as the superintendent said, to really build the assets of those students to be able to make a culture shift in their school. So so the schools have come on voluntarily with a particular focus on sites that have disproportionality. I think one of the recommendations was that we expand to elementary schools. Certainly the biggest obstacle to our expansion is funding. And one of the really exciting things about the local control funding formula is that over time we will be seeing additional assets that will enable us to bring this to more school sites. That's the plan. We have a tiered expansion over the next 5 years with the goal of reaching every school over that period of time.
So next 5 years, all schools have it?
That really is our goal, is to within the next 5 years, touch every school, that every school would be a restorative school. And a couple of methods, I think, again, the superintendent mentioned that one of the ways that we'll do this is through our discipline matrix. You know, we will be aligned at every school, in every classroom, where students will receive an equitable response to a problem behavior. That's one strategy, but we'll also continue to expand our professional development. And so we'll reach more teachers. Each year we'll reach more teachers and more leaders with training on how to implement restorative justice.
I just want to add on by just sharing briefly that in our Pathway to Excellence, we do call out the fact that we are looking to expand and learn upon these lessons, and it is our expectation by 2020 that all of our students, all of our schools will be implementing restorative practices, and that will include restorative justice, that will include practices such as no-nonsense nurturing, practices such as culturally responsive PBIS, and then also expanding programs such as manhood development to the populations of students that I mentioned, as well as reaching more African American male students. So we think that's extremely important. As was mentioned, we do that through the discipline matrix. We do that through providing more professional development. We also do that, though, by, as a district, finding ways to model that in our restorative approaches in our practices, and then also by encouraging and recognizing those schools who take that encouragement and implement progress by celebrating those places of success and more public means and more public ways, and then finally by taking the recommendations that are here and just thinking thoughtfully over the course of the next several years as to how do we implement the full breadth of these recommendations in a way that's thoughtful, in a way that is integrated into the larger growth and development that we have as a district as we implement the Pathway to Excellence.
Yes, the woman in the purple, please.
I have a question for the superintendent. One of the downsides of the discipline matrix is it can resemble mandatory sentencing, which we know has increased the number of people being sent to prison, as it's reductionist in terms of behavior. If you do this, your punishment is this. And one of the beauties of RJ is that it gets beyond the behavior and into the causes and allows what's going on in the individual situation to come to fruition. So I'm wondering how you can build that into a discipline matrix to allow principals and school leaders to still have flexibility to take into account an individual student's situation as opposed to behavior X equals consequence Y.
Yeah, I certainly can understand as a result of previous no excuses type of policies where zero tolerance types of policies where one could extrapolate that a matrix may do that. That is certainly not the practice that I'm familiar with. The focus is on implementing restorative approaches, and the way the matrix works is helping people understand the limit of their authority. And currently, right now, we have situations where in a school you have students being suspended 5 days for using profanity, which makes zero sense. Or students being truant for excessive periods of time and then being suspended from school. I mean, these types of practices make no sense. And what you accomplish through restorative, through a discipline matrix that embeds restorative approaches is helping people understand the realm of possibilities. And what we find is most behaviors in schools are low-level types of behaviors, where suspension is, well, you're making clear, suspension is not a tool available to you here. And you begin to elevate the types of tools that are available to people that embed more of a focus on restorative practices. And so I think that that's the opportunity that is available to us. Discretion is important in any discipline matrix, but we want to make sure that the discretion is not that leads to more people exercising discretion to find ways to get rid of more kids. And that's why it's really important to help people understand the types of criteria that one should consider before you are looking to move students out of your school through the suspension. Again, I believe strongly that unless students are creating a safety risk for themselves, other students, and or other adults, that we can find ways to keep students in school. Now, if we are going to do that, we have to find ways to resource schools better through more training, more individuals who are trained in restorative approaches, and then also ways in which we're outreaching with families and partnering with community-based organizations that also provide support. And I don't want to forget the importance of social emotional support in that if we are going to avoid the zero tolerance type of effect that have happened. So I just want to make sure that we say emphatically that our desire and our intention, and I'm confident that our implementation will avoid the type of arbitrary types of practices where leaders decide, well, because you got on my nerves especially bad today, I'm going to suspend you 5 days for a behavior that could have been solved in school, and where you see a student who is exhibiting much different behavior just an hour later after the incident has happened.
Any other questions? Sir.
Yes. I'd like to know, in the schools, will they be equipped with psychologists or people that are professional to talk to kids with more serious situations, and in the future will that be included in the schools, more counselors?
Yeah, thank you. And so I definitely appreciate the question, because it piggybacks on the point I was making around making, again, the importance of social emotional supports. And so that speaks to the needs of having more providers in our schools, counselors, social workers, psychologists, if you will. And that is certainly a goal of ours. And I think that also speaks to the importance of training, because one of the big things that we do have in our district, a results-based budgeting process, and while we want to ensure consistency in terms of the types of services that are available to all schools, as we could mature in our implementation of that, we want to make sure that we have built in the understanding at the site level and that leads to desire for these types of opportunities. Because what we do know is that the more that people want and understand they need these types of programs and services available to students, the better they use them on behalf of students. And so, yes, we are definitely interested in planning to see an escalation in those supports as the state continues to fund the local control funding formula. We definitely intend to see that, but we also want to make sure that we have increased the ask both in the community and on local school site councils, those individuals serving on those site councils, and with leaders, so that when those funds are provided, they're actually being used to add them. And then finally, I want to say, you know, schools have discretionary funds, and the more all of you and the larger community is aware of those discretionary funds and how they can be used. Discretionary means at the discretion of the leader with their input from their site council. They can be adding those supports now. They don't have to wait. They can choose to make those decisions now, and many times come up with, and many leaders already do, use their supports this way and find ways to collaborate with community-based organizations to stretch those funds so that they serve more students, and we certainly support those efforts as a district.
I wanted to just add one thing to that. It's really exciting. We just received a national grant that is focused on violence prevention through restorative justice, and it's a grant that will enable us to provide some trauma supports for students who are caught at school engaging in some type of violence. Most likely it'll be students who are caught fighting or who are in some way engaged in a physical altercation. The focus of that grant, which is from the Department of Ed, it's called Project Prevent, and we're one of 20 districts across the country who were fortunate enough to receive the grant. It's going to enable us to do some trauma screening with our students who are engaging in violence, so that we'll be able to address the root causes of those conflicts, of that violence, and also it will help us to provide wraparound supports for students that, because of violence, have been excluded from our schools. So students that have faced expulsion, students that have been incarcerated. We're going to be able to provide a restorative justice circle of support and accountability that will bring mentoring, that will bring mental health services, job training, etc., and will involve members of the community, including clergy, extended family, etc., to really wrap around those students that are re-entering and follow them for the course of a year. So that if stuff comes up at school, if we're seeing kind of problem behavior emerging, we can prevent that from resulting in violence and or exclusion. This grant will target our 6 comprehensive high schools, and it is over a period of 5 years. So we'll be really excited to, as we have data from that, we'll be excited to share that with you as well. But it addresses the issue of, you know, trauma, and how are we engaged in, through restorative practices, how are we offering healing? We think that since crime hurts, justice should heal, and a part of that is bringing those counseling services to students as in addition to our restorative practices.
Any other questions? Great. Then before we wrap up, I just want to call your attention to the board at the back. That is some of the most profound findings from the report. If you have time to just take a look and soak that in, that'd be great. Also, I would direct you to the OUSD website, where the executive summary of the report is posted. The full-length version will be there shortly. If you go to the program heading on the homepage of the OUSD website and then select Restorative Justice, the summary is prominently posted there, and that has a lot more detailed information. And before we go, I want to thank, of course, all our panelists, and also salute a person we haven't recognized yet. That's District 4 School Board Director Nina Sen. She was recently elected in November and just took office last week, but she's been deeply involved in the work as a private citizen for many years and was one of the first people who exposed me to restorative justice concepts. So I want to thank her for championing that work. And as always, if you have any questions, you can contact the communications department or contact David or Barb directly, and they can give you more information on all our behavioral health practices in OUSD. Thank you.